Okay, so get this. Plastic particles are now found in human brains. And it makes you wonder, what if this isn't just pollution? What if, maybe, it's programming? Welcome to the cool, weird, and possible. Today, we're plunging into a question that's, frankly, as mind-bending as it is alarming. What exactly are microplastics doing inside our brains? This feels like more than just an environmental worry. We're going to explore a darker, maybe more intentional possibility. We're calling this deep dive Microplastic Minds, the silent zombie apocalypse.
Wow. That's quite a premise to open with. It definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, okay, to ground us right from the start, let's be clear about the core scientific truth here. The presence of microplastics in human brains. Well, that's not hypothetical anymore. It's actually a documented scientific finding.
Right. Okay. So if it's documented, if it's real, where did we even start understanding this? This sort of microscopic invasion. How long have we known these tiny plastic bits are getting into us?
Yeah, the journey to really understanding this kind of kicked off back in 2004. There was a marine biologist, Richard Thompson. He's the one who first coined the term microplastics. His groundbreaking work started tracing these particles, not just in the oceans, but, well, everywhere, through our whole environment. And what his research and research since then has increasingly shown is that these things don't just stay on the seabed. They are now, like, undeniably present in human tissue, including, yes, the brain. Thompson actually has this quote that really hits hard here. He said, "We're not talking about hypothetical future risks. We're seeing potential harm at concentrations that already exist in our environment." And just think about this for a second. Global plastic production. It's quadrupled just since the year 2000. Quadrupled. That huge surge means these tiny particles they're just absolutely everywhere. In the oceans, the air we're breathing right now, and yeah, inside our own bodies.
Okay, wow. And this brings us right to the core of what we want to dig into today. The really big questions for you, listening right now. Are these microplastics subtly altering human consciousness? Like the very way we think and perceive the world. Is what we're seeing purely an environmental disaster, with unintended side effects?
Mm.
Or is there maybe a disturbing layer of intentional mind control going on that we haven't fully grasped yet? And maybe the most unsettling idea, could the big behavioral shifts we're kind of seeing across society, the changes in collective mood, actions, could that actually be linked to this pervasive plastic contamination?
Those are definitely compelling questions, heavy questions. And to really unpack them properly, we need to take a bit of a journey. So first, we'll explore the cutting-edge science. What do we actually know about microplastics in the body and what they do? Then we'll shift gears a bit and delve into some genuinely unsettling real-world history, actual mind manipulation experiments. And finally, we'll try to connect these threads, maybe see how they relate to broader societal stuff, perhaps even through the lens of, pop culture.
Okay, because this is where the science starts to feel, I don't know, like it's straight out of a sci-fi script, right? These recent neuroscience studies, they're not just saying, yep, microplastics are in the brain. They're showing that these particles are physically obstructing brain blood vessels. It's not just like they're passing through. It's a physical blockage, a barrier.
That's a really critical point. It's not just transient, the potential long-term buildup.
Yeah.
This accumulation of microplastic cell obstructions. Yeah, that could significantly contribute to chronic conditions. Things like neurodegeneration, that's basically the progressive loss of brain cells. You see it in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and even cardiovascular disease. Imagine these tiny specks getting lodged in the really small blood vessels, the capillaries, that feed our brain cells oxygen and nutrients. And there's one finding that really supports this concern. Studies have shown that people with dementia, they can have up to 10 times as much plastic in their brains compared to people without dementia. Now, it's a correlation. We need more research.
Yeah.
But it definitely suggests, a profoundly concerning link.
So it's way more than just physical blockages. Then it sounds like the particles themselves, or maybe the chemicals in them, are actively messing with how our brains work, possibly even how we behave. And it's not just the brain, right? The research I saw suggests they can get into all body systems and cause actual behavioral changes. Yeah, that leads to the really insidious part. A lot of the chemicals in plastics things, from car tires, food packaging, even cosmetics, they're called endocrine disruptors.
Exactly. That's the other major pathway of concern. Endocrine disruptors. These are chemicals that basically interfere with our body's hormone system. And the endocrine system, it's like the master regulator for, almost everything. Mood, metabolism, growth, reproduction. Even tiny, tiny doses of these chemicals can mimic our natural hormones or block them or just change how they're made and broken down. So it throws this incredibly delicate hormonal balance completely out of whack. And that can lead to widespread problems, including really profound effects on brain development and function, affecting things like learning, memory, emotional control. So yeah, it's like a double whammy. The physical particles blocking things up and the chemicals leaching out and disrupting our body's internal communication.
This whole picture, this invisible infiltration changing our minds, it genuinely sounds like something from a spy thriller, doesn't it? Which, maybe not coincidentally, brings us to that historical parallel you mentioned, something some people might find. You're a little too close for comfort, Project MKUltra. And this wasn't fiction, right? This was a real, very disturbing CIA program started way back in 1953. It was all covert, using high doses of psychoactive drugs like LSD, often without people even knowing, right? Plus things like hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, really coercive methods. And their stated goal was, disturbingly, to manipulate mental states and brain functions, even aiming to create what they actually called a robot agent.
Oh, absolutely. MKUltra was. Its scope was genuinely alarming. It operated through all these front organizations, often pretending to be legitimate research projects, across more than 80 different institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons. And what makes it particularly chilling is that they were doing highly illegal things, explicitly using unwitting American and Canadian citizens as test subjects. Some historians even point to links with earlier ethically horrifying interrogation experiments done by the Nazis, noting MKUltra used mescaline on unsuspecting people too. There was a follow-up program, MK Search, that ran from 65 to 71. Its explicit goal was testing the covert use of biological, chemical, and radioactive material systems and techniques of producing predictable human behavioral and/or physiological changes. The ultimate really unsettling aim was essentially to create a Manchurian candidate, someone whose mind could be controlled remotely or triggered.
Wow. It just paints such a vivid picture of that intense Cold War paranoia, doesn't it? The CIA was pouring millions into this, just desperate to figure out how to control minds, get information. It really makes you wonder, if they admitted that happened, what else might they have explored? What lessons did they take away? And for a lot of people, I think this history fuels that deep suspicion that maybe there's still an unseen hand involved somehow. We've all heard the chemtrails idea, for example, this theory that governments are spraying chemicals from planes to manipulate us. Although it is important to note, Edward Snowden, who saw more classified U.S. government data than almost anyone, he specifically said he looked for evidence of that and found nothing. Still, that underlying idea of a silent, unseen manipulation, it remained incredibly potent for a lot of people.
Indeed. And the scientific community has consistently debunked the chemtrail theory itself, explaining the trails as normal contrails under certain atmospheric conditions. But the idea behind it, the idea of intentional large-scale manipulation, especially targeting our minds, that resonates really deeply with something in our collective psyche. And it's fascinating to see how that exact fear pops up again and again in popular culture, creating some really interesting parallels to what we're discussing with microplastics.
Absolutely. You think about some of those classic sci-fi or horror stories that play right into this anxiety, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? That taps directly into the fear of losing yourself, being subtly replaced without even knowing it. Or They Live, where the special sunglasses reveal all the hidden messages, the subliminal commands everywhere, controlling everyone. And yeah, our episode title, The Silent Zombie Apocalypse, that immediately makes you think of shows like The Last of Us, with that fungal infection taking over people, changing them completely. These stories, they're not just scary entertainment, are they? They really tap into a deep societal nervousness about unseen forces, biological, chemical, informational, that could change us from the inside.
Exactly. The zombie metaphor itself, as a genre, it's like a powerful cultural barometer. It's evolved over time to reflect whatever society's anxious about then. George Romero's early zombie movies, they use zombies to critique consumerism, society just devouring itself. Later, zombies kind of embodied our fear of incurable diseases, these silent pathogens that just creep in and change victims forever. Post 9/11 zombies often represented urban anxieties, overcrowding, the fear of societal order just collapsing. These narratives often run parallel to real-world worries, environmental damage, running out of resources, disease outbreaks, things that could lead to societal breakdown. There's even this idea of cognitive decline, like a society gradually losing its ability to think abstractly or adapt, being a factor in historical collapses. And that feels uncomfortably close to some of these themes today.
Whether it's a terrifying brain fungus or an insidious chemical pollutant like microplastics, or maybe even a deliberate hidden manipulation, the core idea that something unseen could be subtly, silently changing us, altering our minds and behaviors, it's just deeply rooted in our collective imagination. And maybe, just maybe, given the science we're seeing now, it's not quite as far-fetched as we used to think. So we kicked off this deep dive asking some pretty unsettling questions, didn't we? Are microplastics messing with our consciousness? Is this whole thing just an environmental mess, or is it something more like intentional mind control? And could the weird behavioral shifts in society actually be linked to all this plastic? What's really fascinating, I think, is how the latest science and this very real history of government paranoia kind of collide to create this potent, unsettling picture.
Yeah. Looking purely at the science, the evidence is piling up fast about the real environmental and health impacts. No question there. We're seeing strong links in the neurobehavioral abnormalities, basically. Changes in how the brain works, affecting mood, thinking, movement. There's also clear evidence of inflammation, that hormone mimicry from the endocrine disruptors we talked about, and the physical blocking of brain blood vessels. That could directly contribute to serious conditions like neurodegeneration and cardiovascular disease. And that finding about people with dementia having up to 10 times more plastic in their brains, that's huge. It raises so many more questions. And just to grasp the scale of this infiltration, get this, the amount of microplastics found in human brains, it jumped by 50% just between 2016 and 2024. 50%. That's apparently as much as a spoon's worth, like 7 grams building up in our brains in less than 10 years. That's staggering.
Right. And then you layer on top of that scientific reality the historical stuff, like Project MKUltra. It just provides this stark, unsettling parallel, especially if you lean towards conspiracy thinking. The CIA explicitly tried to manipulate minds using drugs, hypnosis, whatever they could to create, as they put it, a robot agent. They were actively looking for predictable human behavioral and/or physiological changes using hidden chemicals, biological agents, even radiation. And, okay, while Edward Snowden, who saw tons of classified stuff, said he found zero evidence for chemtrails, the fact remains that secret government attempts at large-scale mind control did happen, that history exists. And that's what fuels this persistent suspicion for some people that maybe something unseen, something more than just pollution, could actually be influencing us without us knowing. So what does all this actually mean for you listening right now, just going about your day? Have you maybe noticed any weird shifts in your own behavior or your thinking patterns recently? Things that maybe now make you pause and think, look, while the grand conspiracy is still speculative, the fact that microplastics are in our bodies, that's not speculation. But the good news is there are practical things you can actually do right now to cut down your exposure. Think about your drinking water. A reverse osmosis filter system, they're really effective, can remove like 99.9% of microplastics. With food, try to go for fresh stuff over heavily packaged things. Choose glass containers over plastic, or cans. Cans often have plastic linings, you know. And definitely store food in glass, stainless steel, ceramic. And absolutely do not heat food in plastic. Heat makes chemicals leach out way faster. Even small things like maybe using rock salt instead of sea salt. Rock salt generally has fewer microplastics. Every little bit probably helps.
It really is a compelling thought experiment, isn't it? Whether we're dealing with an invisible pollutant just silently changing us from the inside, or whether we're contemplating something more deliberate, a hidden hand, the basic idea that something unseen could be subtly tweaking our minds and behaviors, it resonates deeply. It really mirrors those anxieties we see in zombie stories, doesn't it? Where unchecked consumption or running out of resources or incurable diseases, they trigger these huge societal shifts, maybe even a loss of what makes us human.
Well, thank you for joining us on this really thought-provoking deep dive into microplastic minds, the silent zombie apocalypse. Make sure you subscribe to Cool, Weird, and Possible wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating, the strange, and the, well, possibly real.